Hello and welcome. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad. So glad that you took some time to be with us today. Today we're going to reflect on the subject of surviving the storm. Surviving the storm. And we'll be looking at the Gospel of Mark, the 4th chapter, verses 35 through 41. From time to time, all of us face difficulties, all of us face challenges, all of us face trials. And some of these trials really look like they're going to take us down. And when we face those trials and those crises, we need to know how to respond. And in the Gospel of Mark, we have the story of Jesus quieting a storm, and we'll look at that story to see some principles that can help us survive the storms that we face in our own lives. So, starting in the Gospel of Mark, the 4th chapter, at the 35th verse, these words can be found. On that day, when evening had come, he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving behind the crowd, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was. Other boats were with him. A great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat, so that the boat was already being swamped. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him up and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" He woke up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." The wind ceased, and there was a dead calm. And he said to them, "Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great awe and said to one another, "Who is this that even the wind and sea obey?" It's very interesting in that here the disciples were following Jesus. They'd been working with Jesus. They were following his direction where Jesus wanted to go to the other side. So they got into the boat and they were crossing over. And while they were doing the things that they were supposed to be doing, the storm arose and they found themselves in the midst of a crisis. I believe one of the first things that we have to understand is that storms are a part of life and crises are a part of life. Many times we've come to believe that if something has gone wrong in our lives, then we must be doing something wrong, or maybe we're doing something that we shouldn't be doing. But the reality is that the rain falls on the just and the unjust, the sun shines on the just and unjust, and storms arise and rage. Whether you're doing the right things or the wrong things, the just or the unjust, it's just part of life. And from time to time, often through no fault of our own, there's nothing that we could have done differently or to prevent it. Many times in the course of living our lives and doing the things that we're called to do, just as the disciples there, we're going to face some storms and we're going to face some crises. And so I believe that's one of the first things that we have to recognize is there will be difficult days and there will be difficult times. No one is immune from that. None of us are immune from it. Not just because we try and do the right things, not just because we've been responsible, not just because we've been good stewards, not because we have good hearts or any of those things. There is nothing that is going to exempt us from having problems and challenges in life. The storm at some point comes for all of us. And so what happens when the storm comes up? Sometimes when the storm comes up, we are naturally afraid. We're naturally throws us off. And what do we do and how do we respond when we are afraid? One thing that I'm thankful for is that the disciples did not just go down in the boat. They did not just go down in the boat. One of the things that I think is really important is that they actually sought help. They had Jesus in the boat. And they actually went and sought help. Hey, by the way, that's another point too. Jesus was actually still in the boat with them. One of the things that we want to remember is that when we face these storms, when we face these challenges, we haven't been abandoned by God. We haven't been forsaken by God. God is still with us, even in the midst of the storm. Even in the midst of our greatest storm, the creator of the universe, the sustainer of life, the redeemer of the world is still with us and going through the storm with us. We've never been abandoned. We've never been forsaken. We've never been left behind. But God is, in fact, still with us, and we can turn to God and we can seek help. But whatever kind of resources that we have, we do want to actively seek help. when we're in the midst of a storm. Sometimes that means that we go and get the advice of a friend or a friend support, or we turn to our communities, our faith communities. Sometimes we might turn to a trusted counselor or advisor. Sometimes it might mean going to getting some therapy or getting some help, getting some counseling. It might even mean getting some medication. But one of the things that we do is that we don't just go down with the boat. When the storms come and the waters rage, we do want to seek out help and look for help. And that's one of the things that the disciples did. I'm so glad that they didn't just go down with the boat. They were afraid. The water was coming into the boat. They were concerned that the boat was going to be swamped, and so they went to Jesus, looking for help. Now, one of the things that Jesus did is that Jesus actually got up, and it said that he rebuked the wind. Our translation says, "Peace, be still." One of the things that I've come to understand from L. Michael White, who was a professor of religion at one time at Oberlin, and I believe he finished the bulk of his career at the University of Texas in Austin. He was a professor of religion and did a lot on early Christianity in the Bible. He was a Jesus scholar. One of the things that he says about this passage is that Jesus' language was a little bit more colloquial. It was a little bit more colorful. What's translated as "peace be still" might be even translated maybe "stuff a sock in it" or "zip it" or just "quiet," quiet. One of the things that Jesus is showing us, I believe, is that sometimes we have to speak to the storm, because many times the storm is in our minds, and like many times we have a lot of negative thoughts and negative worries, and we get into a spiral of negative thinking and negative thoughts and anxiety. And sometimes we have to interrupt the storm that's in our mind and just say, "Quiet, zip it, put a sock in it." Maybe even shut up, stop. That's actually a technique that a motivational speaker, Tony Robbins, has brought up, that I've often used, and it's been something that's very, very important. One of the things that we see from Jesus's reaction is that Jesus did not believe that this storm is one that they really needed to be quite as afraid of. In fact, he said, "Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith?" That this storm was not a fatal storm that was going to capsize them. But yet, as the winds arose and the waves came, their fears had escalated, and their fears had escalated to the point where they immediately went to the worst. They thought the worst, and their fears had taken over and just terrorized them. Sometimes when we get into a cycle of fear, when we get into a cycle of negative thinking, sometimes we also have to just interrupt that. We have to become aware that we've become negative. We have to become aware that we've actually been driven by our fears. We have to become aware of that, and we just want to say, "Stop it, hush, calm, be quiet." And that gives us a chance to recenter ourselves. Or more appropriately, what happens is it gives a chance for God to recenter us, or for us to find our center in God, however you want to say it. That many times when the storms and the problems come up in life, storms and problems are a part of our life. And it doesn't mean that we're doing anything wrong. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't have done what we did. But the storm actually sometimes come up when we're doing exactly what we're supposed to be doing. And when that happens, we recognize the storm, and we know that we haven't been left alone. We seek out help. In this case, it was Jesus, but whatever resources that we have in our life for help, whether it's friends, whether it's advisors, whether it's counselors, whether it's doctors, whether it's medicine, we seek out the help that we need when we find ourselves in the midst of a storm. We do not go down alone. We do not go down quietly, but we go and seek the help that we need to get through the storm. And Many times what we have to do is we have to interrupt the storm of negativity that goes through our mind. The fear, the worry, the anxiety, where one thought leads to another thought, leads to another thought, leads to another thought, and then all of a sudden, where the disciples got, we're all going to die. We're all going to fail. This isn't going to work. It's just, sometimes we have to say, stop it. Stop it, stop it, stop it. And we have to recenter our thoughts. We have to allow God to recenter our thoughts, or find our center in God, to calm us down. And then even in what was a storm, we find that we can actually be the calm in the midst of the storm. We can find the calm in the midst of the storm, and we can make it through safely to the other side and go about our mission as we've been called to. So, brothers and sisters, it's when the storms come up, I just want you to know that that's natural, that's part of life. We're going to survive them. We're going to get through to the other side. We're getting through to the other side. Think about all the storms that you've already overcome, all the storms that you've already come through, and we just celebrate that with you. Peace be with you. Glad that you could be with us.